If you're relocating to Ridgefield, Washington, there are probably some things that you've heard about Ridgefield that everybody knows, but today I want to talk about some things that people don't often talk about and aren't easily Googleable. So if that's something you're interested in, stay tuned. Welcome back to Living in the Pacific Northwest with Hal Byrd. I'm Hal Byrd, and I am a licensed broker and realtor in Southwest Washington and the Portland metro area. I make videos about what it's like to live in the area because when my husband and I relocated here 5 years ago, we were in your shoes, and it was such a big leap of faith because there were no channels around like our channel, talking about the pros, the cons, showing what our lifestyle is like here. There was just nothing like it. And so we really wanted to be the resource and friend for you in the Northwest that we didn't have, and share stuff that isn't easily Googleable and that other people just really aren't talking about. So that's what this channel is all about. If you think that's helpful to you, please make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and leave a comment. I would love to hear from you in the comments to know if you are considering Ridgefield, Washington, and where you're moving from. This video is going to be a relatively quick video about things that they don't tell you about Ridgefield, Washington. I think that Ridgefield, Washington is, for the most part, what you see is what you get. When people do research about relocating there and visit, what you see is pretty accurate to what's going on, but there are a few things that are not easily found surface level. And so we're going to talk about 4 things today that people really aren't talking about. And one of these things might be considered a little controversial, so we're going to save that one for last, so make sure you stay tuned. So everybody knows that Ridgefield, Washington is a very up-and-coming, fast-growing city with lots of new home construction, but let's dive a little deeper. So the number one thing that people aren't talking about when it comes to Ridgefield is the difference between living on the east side of I-5 and the west side of I-5. If you look at Ridgefield city limits, you'll see that the majority of the city of Ridgefield is on the west side of I-5. Now, there's a lot of areas that are outside of the city limits that are still considered Ridgefield. Very much like Vancouver, there is incorporated and unincorporated Vancouver. Well, there's also incorporated and unincorporated Ridgefield. And I guess while I'm speaking about Vancouver, if you want to see my video about what they don't tell you about Vancouver, Washington, you can check that out here. And I also have one about Camas here. So on the west side of town, you have the historical downtown area. You have Ross Hours, which is the grocery store. You've got more restaurants, more amenities, the libraries over there, City Hall. There's a lot more conveniences and amenities on the west side of town. Also, all of the schools are on the west side at the moment. They're in the process of building some new schools on the east side of town. So if you are looking at some new home developments or existing property on the east side, I would just know that when you're staying within Ridgefield, you're going to be driving probably to the west side a little bit more. And because a lot of those lands are still privately owned, they're largely held by farms and private owners. The streets that you'll take to get there are not straightforward. They're not laid out in a grid like some cities. And most of Southwest Washington is not laid out that well in a grid. So that's something to know about the difference between the east side of I-5 and the west side of I-5 when it comes to Ridgefield. So if you are thinking about buying a home in Ridgefield, Washington, it would be helpful to work with someone who can explain those differences to you and make sure that it fits with your lifestyle and expectations and needs. Also keep in mind that the east side is presently being more and more developed. There are tons of things coming to Ridgefield, both on the east and west side, but especially on the east side, that I think are worth noting that are going to make life more convenient for those that live on the east side of I-5. So you want to work with someone who can talk to you about those developments and talk to you about which side of I-5 is the best fit for your lifestyle. And maybe you just like the idea of being in Ridgefield and the side doesn't really matter, and that's okay too. That brings us to number 2. As we're talking about convenience, one of the things to know about Ridgefield is that it's not the most walkable part of Southwest Washington. While there are lots of walking trails that connect a lot of the new construction communities, and you've got the wildlife refuge, which is great for natures and outdoors connection to see wildlife. Something to know is that when certain roads don't have great sidewalk infrastructure, and also Ridgefield is very hilly, not like Camas. Camas has like Prune Hill, and it's got the mountains kind of leading into Cascades like Livingston Mountain and places like that. The north side, there's a lot of more sharp hills in Camas. It is hilly for the most part. Ridgefield is more rolling hills. So it's not the most flat walkable area. There are sections that are flat. Again, if you're going to buy a home, work with someone who knows what sections those are, because if you are retiring and you know that you want to be walking through the neighborhood for exercise, but you might not be able to handle hills as you age, through the decades, then that's something that's worth talking to your realtor about, i.e. me. If you want to get in touch with me, my Zoom calendar is in the description below, and you can contact me here. So it's worth knowing, not only is it a bit hilly, but a lot of those roads don't have sidewalks, especially when you're getting out into the countryside or you're looking at Royal Road. There's no sidewalks there. So you just kind of need to know what you want out of a community, and if walking is going to be a big part of a decision factor for you, then Ridgefield might not be the best place for you, or you need to pick specific communities in Ridgefield that are going to fit with a lifestyle that incorporates walking. The flip side to that is that I would say that drivers out here are more conscious than maybe some other places in the country. So my husband, who is an avid bicyclist, often rides with his bike club out on some of those back roads in Ridgefield, and not only are there not sidewalks, but there's also no bike lanes. And even that, though there are no bike lanes, the drivers usually will give space for the cyclists and move over. So then that's kind of one of the benefits of living in a small area. Ridgefield is growing. It's been the fastest growing city in Washington 2 years in a row. So that's one of the benefits of living in a place where maybe it's not so rural, but it's growing, but people still have that mindset where they're going to share the road with you, whether you're walking or biking, or if you're in a car and you move here, you should learn to drive the way that we drive in Southwest Washington, which means moving over into the right lane on the highway when you're not passing. It means giving space for bikers and walkers. Jarrett and I have been up to the northern parts of Washington recently, and they do not drive up there in the Seattle, Tacoma area like they do down here. And I much prefer our drivers down here. So if you move here, I hope you adopt good driving, please. And I think this would be a good point to talk about some of the history of Ridgefield, because Ridgefield is very much in a transition right now. And it's going from being a very small town, country vibe, very small, tight-knit community, to becoming a suburb, and a large one at that. The population has been increasing so much, and I think it's worth talking about some of the history when it comes to Ridgefield. So we're going to give you a little bit of a brief history of Ridgefield here. The original inhabitants of Ridgefield were a Chinook tribe whose village was located at the confluence of Lake River and the Columbia River. Notably, Lewis and Clark visited the area twice on their voyage out west on their way to the Pacific Ocean. The original inhabitants of that Chinook tribe stayed until 1876, where they then located to the mouth of the Lewis River. In 1840, a young Irish immigrant named James Carty filed the first land donation claim in the area, a portion of which is in what is the present-day northern part of downtown Ridgefield. History indicates that Mr. Carty was the only settler until 1853, when Frederick Schobert arrived to homestead 320 acres, which included the southern part of the current downtown area. Family members say that he chose this land because he wanted to log the heavy timber that covered it. In the years that followed, more settlers were drawn to the gently sloping land, again going back to those rolling hills, extending from elevated highland to the banks of Lake River. The original name of the community was Union Ridge due to a number of residents originating from the Union ranks of the Civil War, and it was changed to Ridgefield in 1890 after S.P. McKay successfully circulated a petition to rename the area, and a meeting was called to decide the fate of the city name. In 1909, the established businesses were 2 general merchandise stores, a department store, 2 lumber mills, a water well contractor and driller, 2 contractors, builders, a boat builder, a meat market, a hotel, a shoemaker, a creamery, a barbershop, blacksmith, realtor, and a weaver. So that was about 100 years ago. Also a fun fact that you'll see at the first roundabout in Ridgefield, which is where the Costco is being installed, is that there's a sign that says that Ridgefield is the home of U-Haul, now a household name. And here's a little poem about Ridgefield from Walt. And on the city website, you'll find this poem. There's a little bit of heaven this side of hell, this little bit of heaven in the place which we dwell. The grass is rather shaggy and the fish ponds nearly dry, but I wouldn't change our Ridgefield for a city in the sky. And that poem perfectly segues us into the number 3 thing that they don't tell you about Ridgefield, which is that Ridgefield gives you an extra layer of insulation from Portland. And what I mean by this is that if you live in Vancouver, especially over the last few years, I would say it was less like this when we moved here 5 years ago. But some of the stuff that goes on in Portland, and I'm not talking about the positive side of Portland, you hear the news the last 3 years since 2020 make it seem like Portland is on fire and it's this war zone. And while Portland does have its problems, as someone who goes into Portland on a weekly basis, I can tell you that it was very much blown out of proportion on the news. That being said, there are challenges, but there are a lot of pros to Portland, and I personally like living in Southwest Washington and being able to take advantage of Portland, but not have to live in it. So over the last few years, some of the challenges and struggles in the bad side of Portland have migrated up. It used to be that there was almost like this hard stop between the 2 states, Oregon and Washington, and now we see more houselessness, we see more property crime, specifically related to cars, so more car theft, catalytic converter theft in Vancouver than we used to. And so living in Ridgefield just provides you a little bit more insulation than living directly in Vancouver. That's not to say that Vancouver is this dangerous city. I don't even think Portland is this dangerous city. Like, it's not in the top 10. I mean, not that you want to live in number 11 most dangerous cities, but as someone who's lived in a big city, like some of those things, if you live in a major metropolitan area, just come with the territory. But if you want an extra layer of what's going on in Portland that can trickle into Vancouver, and you don't want what's going on in Vancouver to trickle to Ridgefield, you find that happens less the farther out you get. So living in Ridgefield does give you a little bit of insulation, a little bit of distance between the chaos that can happen in Portland. And with that, we will transition to the 4th thing that they don't tell you about Ridgefield, Washington, and that is that the schools may be overcrowded. Because Ridgefield has been such a fast-growing city these last few years, the school and the new school building hasn't really kept up with the growth. And Ridgefield has been at a point the past couple years where they are very close to passing bonds and levies to get new schools built. And it literally comes down to a few hundred votes that those fail. And this general sentiment from people that I've spoken to in Ridgefield is that the reason is you have, again, that what we might call the old guard of Ridgefield, people who've lived there for years and years and years and don't love the amount of growth that's happening in the city. And then you have people who have relocated here, live in new construction homes, and might have school-age children and want the funding for new schools and really need the funding for those new schools. So on a local politics level, you definitely have 2 sides of this argument. You have people who are anti-building new schools and don't love the school system. And then you have people, probably those who have their kids in the schools, that say we need more schools because the schools are overcrowded. And that's kind of an argument that's going on at a local level. And that's due to population growth. It's due to the enrollment numbers, and then the way that the community is voting. And that can be a challenge. And you won't really see that unless you dig a little deeper into Ridgefield. The schools are usually touted as a positive. They're not the highest ranked schools in the area, but they're certainly not the lowest. They're good schools. And they have their challenges. So that's something to know if you have school-age children. But maybe you're an empty nester and retired and that's less important to you, or you're gonna homeschool your kids. There's lots of different options. So I wouldn't let that deter you from Ridgefield. My personal opinion on Ridgefield is that I think it's one of the most up and coming best places to live in Southwest Washington. And if you don't quite have the budget for Camas, but you want to live somewhere like that, you can watch this video. Is Ridgefield the new Camas? And I'll give you the short answer to the video, which is yes. I think that Ridgefield is the new Camas of Southwest Washington. I think it will become like Camas in terms of price point, desirability, in terms of amenities. I think, honestly, Ridgefield might end up in 5-10 years from now having better amenities than Camas. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. And I'll throw in a little bonus for you. This is something that might be obvious, but I think it's worth noting that in terms of entertainment, if you're gonna have like family come into town or you just like going out to shows and stuff, between RV In Style and the Clark County Fairgrounds and Illinois Casino, that area, which is like the very northernmost part of Ridgefield and the southernmost part of Ridgefield, have all of the best concerts and performances and people coming to town. So if that's something you're into, live entertainment, then Ridgefield is a great place to live for the convenience of being able to go to these different shows and events. And the last added benefit you have is that because you're off of I-5 and you're north of where 205 and I-5 merge, whether you need to get to the east side of Portland or the west side of Portland, the airport, or you want to go up to Seattle or out to the coast, there's a lot of different options. It situates you geographically in a place that's very convenient without tons and tons of traffic. And I really like that. Plus the speed limit there is 70 miles per hour on the highway. So it's very well situated for a lot of different needs and circumstances. So maybe that fits you, maybe it doesn't. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video about things they don't tell you about Ridgefield, Washington. If you are looking to buy, sell, or invest in the Pacific Northwest, whether you're looking to move to or move within the Portland Metro and Southwest Washington areas, I would be more than happy to help you. All of my contact information is here. You can shoot me a text at 360-818-4438. I'd be happy to discuss with you as you are considering a move. And if you know anyone who's considering a move, make sure to send them this video. So with that being said, I look forward to hearing you in the comments. Make sure to give this video a like on your way out, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao. I am also a certified relocation specialist and certified luxury specialist. So if that's something, when my husband and I relocated here 5 years ago, there were no good resources when it came to that we didn't have, and share stuff that isn't equal. When people go look do things that are not easily, and one of the things, okay, now everybody knows that Ridgefield, Washington is, how many times am I gonna say Ridgefield, Washington? Are still considered Ridgefield, very much like Vancouver. And you've got the wildlife refuge, which is great for natures and outdoors connection to see wildlife. Hello, it's a wildlife refuge. As I say, again. So my husband, who is an avid bicyclist, can I call you that?
I'll take that.